Hey guys, tonight we drift back to the cold marble corridors of Tudor England, where velvet hides paranoia, and the scent of rose oil barely covers the smell of ambition. You find yourself in a room lit by guttering candles, gold thread glimmering in the shadows, and somewhere in that shimmer sits a red-haired girl with eyes too sharp for her own good. She's Elizabeth, the daughter of a king who changes wives the way you change socks, and she's learning fast that every smile could be her last. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening somewhere far away, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where these late-night history wanderings reach. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing at the edge of 1540s England, a place that's glittering with ceremony but crawling with whispers. Being royal, you realize, isn't about silks and banquets, it's about constantly calculating which curtsy might save your neck. Elizabeth is still a teenager, but already she knows how to measure her words with surgical precision. She's the daughter of Anne Boleyn, the glamorous, doomed queen who lost her head for giving birth to the wrong baby. You might think that would earn Elizabeth some sympathy. But in Tudor England, sympathy is a currency no one can afford. Every morning, you watch her rise early to the sound of servants bustling through the chambers of Hatfield House. Her governess reminds her, never speak without thinking, never laugh too loudly, never let them see you frightened. She's fluent in Latin and Greek before most kids her age can spell their names, because education is her armor. If she can't rely on family, she'll rely on intellect. Even her handwriting, small, perfect, and almost too elegant, feels like a shield. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth's early brilliance came from natural genius or desperate necessity. But you can sense it either way, she's sharpening herself for survival. Every compliment she gives to a Tudor, every polite yes, my lord, to a courtier, it's all performance. There's no real childhood here. Her dolls are carved from politics, her lullabies sung by paranoia, and then there's the shadow that haunts every conversation, Henry VIII, her father. The man's temper is legend. He's already divorced 2 wives and executed another, Elizabeth's own mother. She was barely 3 when Anne Boleyn was led to the scaffold, but you know that kind of wound doesn't heal. People pretend not to notice the ghost in Elizabeth's gaze. But they feel it anyway. At banquets, you can almost taste the unease. Henry sits at the head of the table, laughing one moment and snarling the next, while courtiers giggle nervously and pass the wine faster than usual. Elizabeth sits small and composed, memorizing how power moves, how her father's flattery turns to fury, how a careless word can end a life. You'd think she'd want to disappear, but no, she studies. She learns that charm is armor, wit is weaponry, and silence is often survival. It's easy to romanticize royalty, but if you could slip into her silk slippers, you'd realize how claustrophobic it is. Every corridor smells faintly of fear and perfume, every gesture is monitored. You can't sneeze without someone writing about it. And gossip travels faster than any carriage. One wrong smile at the wrong man, and you're suddenly ambitious. One frown at the wrong lady, and you're ungrateful. Here's a quirky little tidbit. Elizabeth's tutor once designed her lessons to include music, philosophy, and, oddly enough, calligraphy drills so long they gave her cramps. He claimed that graceful handwriting was the mark of a disciplined mind. Imagine being told your ink loops might define your destiny. Sometimes, she sneaks out to the gardens, where the air smells of damp earth and crushed herbs. There, for a fleeting moment, she's just a girl again, watching bees dive into lavender and wondering what freedom tastes like. You can almost hear her whispering to herself, one day, I'll be safe. One day, I'll be strong enough. And yet, even in that peace, you know she doesn't believe it fully. You probably wouldn't survive this world for an hour. The court smiles are daggers, its affection is a trap. And Elizabeth, barely old enough to drive a modern scooter, is already mastering the art of walking through it barefoot. What makes her extraordinary isn't her royal blood, it's her awareness. She sees how people bend like reeds in the wind around her father's moods, how the church shifts like sand under every new decree. Religion, loyalty, even love, everything here is conditional. Everything can be rewritten. By night, she studies by candlelight, eyes stinging from smoke, repeating Latin conjugations and royal genealogies. Her nurse scolds her to rest, but Elizabeth just smiles faintly, quill in hand, already plotting how to control the narrative of her own life. Because she knows, the moment she stops learning, someone else will start writing her story for her, and maybe, just maybe, that's why the girl with the flame-colored hair learns to keep her heart behind glass. Because she's already seen what happens when women in her family let emotion rule. And Bullen smiled too brightly. Catherine Howard flirted too freely. Elizabeth? She'll smile only when it serves her. You stand there watching her blow out the candle, the wick hissing like a tiny snake. In the darkness, her silhouette is still, statue-like, untouchable. But inside her, the gears are already turning, quietly, relentlessly. She's building herself into something new. Not just a princess. A survivor. A future queen forged by fear, polished by intellect, and destined for loneliness. The corridors outside hum with distant footsteps. Someone laughs, a high, brittle sound. Elizabeth's eyes flicker open again. She's awake, always awake, already dreaming of power. You wake to the thunder of drums in the courtyard, the kind of ceremonial noise meant to drown out quieter truths. Henry VIII is in one of his unpredictable moods again. As you trail behind his jewel-drenched courtiers, tension hums through the air. This is Elizabeth's father, the man who bent England to his will, whose love stories end like wars. Being his daughter is both blessing and curse. Royal blood elevates her, but it's the same blood staining Tower stones. She doesn't just inherit his legacy, she inherits his temper. You can almost smell the iron on his breath, the grease on his robes, the way courtiers bow too low, hiding their necks. Henry's 6 wives are carved into her memory like cautionary tales, Catherine dignified but discarded, and brilliant and beheaded, Jane angelic but dead. By the time Elizabeth can read, she's learned marriage means danger. Historians debate if that fear or her hunger for power shaped her future, but perhaps both did. When Henry visits his children, trumpets blare, gold blinds the eye. He calls her precious pearl, but the warmth is brittle. If she reminds him too much of Anne, he chills, if not, he forgets. So she performs, kneels, smiles, quotes her lessons. Her eyes never fully relax. One winter night when she's 9, the hall reeks of smoke, mutton, and ale. And of Cleves tries to keep things light. A servant drops a platter. Henry explodes. A heartbeat later, he's laughing, calling Elizabeth clever. Everyone laughs too, praying this Henry stays. You can't blame her for growing up guarded. Even her toys are symbols of power. A velvet prayer book, rumored to be approved by the king, feels as much a warning as a gift. Love here is always conditional. Henry grows heavier, sicker, crueler. He executes nobles for blinking wrong. Elizabeth watches, a teen learning survival from fear. One week he hugs her, the next he imprisons her tutor. Trust is a trapdoor. So she hones her mask, perfect timing, careful silence, sharp observation. She inherits not his rage, but his cunning. There's a story historians love, Elizabeth asking why her mother died. Official answer, treason. Whispered truth, politics. And Bullen was too clever, too loud. Elizabeth files that lesson away like a hidden blade. She will never make that mistake. In the garden, she finds a neglected rosebush for Anne. Kneeling, she trims the dead petals. Thorns pierce her skin, she doesn't flinch. She whispers, prayer or vow. Forgiveness or quiet hatred. No one knows. But the wound shapes her. No one grows up in Henry VIII's shadow soft. She grows sharp. When Henry finally dies, the court exhales. Bells ring, nobles mourn on cue. Elizabeth, caught between Mary and Edward, feels both loss and freedom. She doesn't cry. Candlelight flickers across her face as she whispers, "The throne kills love," then blows it out. Her father's footsteps fade. Whispers rise. And Elizabeth, no longer a child, begins to plan her survival in a world where royal daughters live one wrong breath from the scaffold. You open your eyes to the gray morning light filtering through frost-rimmed windows. Elizabeth appears again, older now, not yet queen. The air smells of ink and damp linen. Outside, ravens squawk. It's the kind of morning that makes everything feel suspicious, which in her life, it is. She walks down the narrow corridor of yet another borrowed house. As a royal child of doubtful legitimacy, she drifts between residences with only books and letters for luggage. Servants bow carefully. Everyone waits to see which way power shifts next. Historians debate whether this instability made her paranoid or simply pragmatic. Either way, she learns that trust is a luxury. Her letters are coded, her conversations rehearsed, even dolls checked for secrets. At 10, playtime is already politics. Edward VI, pale and pious, now sits on the throne. Elizabeth attends lessons under strict tutors, absorbing not just Latin but tone, how compliments mask agendas. Roger Ascham makes her read standing to strengthen mind and body. She obeys, though her eyes keep flicking to the door. She practices the virginals, every note controlled, not expressive. Music is training, like everything else. Then the letters come. Courtiers, bishops, distant relatives write polite words lined with subtext, marriage offers, warnings to be humble. She replies perfectly, measuring danger between lines. Sometimes she escapes to Hatfield's frosted gardens, breathing in the cold. For a heartbeat, she's just a young woman dreaming of sunlight. Then someone coughs, the mask returns. Her sister Mary, devoutly Catholic, keeps her distance. The kingdom trembles with religious tension. Belief itself is dangerous. Too clear a stance means vulnerability. One evening she receives Seneca's Tragedies. She reads a line on fortune's cruelty and smiles faintly. Irony is safer than faith. Even her ladies can't be trusted. Gossip turns to scandal with a single misplaced jest. A story spreads that she trapped a spider and whispered, "Patience." Real or not, it fits her growing reputation. She writes to Catherine Parr, the kind stepmother who offers brief safety. But Thomas Seymour, handsome, reckless, arrives. He flirts. She's 14, unsure. Catherine catches them in a compromising moment. Rumors explode. Elizabeth is sent away to Hatfield in silence, learning a new rule: vulnerability ruins. She buries herself in study. Books become fortresses, prayers disguises. In her notes she underlines a phrase, "Video et taceo," I see and say nothing. It becomes her way of breathing. Frost melts, freezes, melts again. She listens, waits, speaks little. You follow her through cold corridors and begin to understand why the woman she will become smiles like a saint and thinks like a spy. The walls are damp. Torches hiss. And for the first time, real fear seeps in, because you're pacing the Tower of London beside Elizabeth. The stones whisper of queens and traitors, their fates written by whoever held the quill. It's 1554. Queen Mary rules, a devout Catholic, wary of betrayal. England is torn between faiths, and Elizabeth, the Protestant heir with dangerous popularity, is now the greatest threat in the realm. Historians still debate her role in Wyatt's rebellion, but here, in the cold, the debate doesn't matter. The guards are watching her every breath. She's led through Traitor's Gate, river stinking, hands trembling but chin high. Crowds gather, pitying, jeering, crossing themselves. It feels both like trial and execution. Inside, her room is bare, windows barred, facing the courtyard where her mother once walked to her death. She doesn't cry. She calculates. One warder later claimed she calmed herself by counting the iron studs on her door, over 200, memorized in the dark. If they come, she whispered, I'll greet them by number. 41, 42, the food is bad, silence worse. Interrogators arrive daily, polite and cold, asking the same questions about rebellion, letters, foreign envoys. She answers carefully. Never too firm, never too soft, balancing on a verbal tightrope. At night, she paces, murmuring Latin prayers not for mercy but control. Candlelight casts her shadow like a queen in waiting. Some say Mary hesitated to kill her. Others say the council feared rebellion. To Elizabeth, mercy feels like a coin flipping. Each sunrise is a question mark. Weeks pass. Rain seeps through the stones. Rumors of executions swirl like a clock ticking down. Then word comes, she'll be moved to Woodstock under house arrest. Not freedom, but air. The journey is slow, public, people kneel, spit, stare. Elizabeth keeps her gaze fixed ahead, mask unbroken. At Woodstock, cleaner air meets deeper isolation. Her writing tools are confiscated, so she carves a message into glass with a diamond ring, much suspected by me, nothing proved can be. A quiet, perfect rebellion. She chats softly with servants about weather and bells, but alone she goes still, plotting, not escape, but survival. In exile she sharpens her patience, noting how loyalty shifts, how fear cracks resolve. Spring comes. Mary's popularity collapses. The council turns toward Elizabeth. Not out of love but necessity. One morning, the guards tell her she's free, no tears. No speeches. She simply steps outside, breathes, and says, "It is a fine day." She never speaks of the tower again, but it clings to her. You can see it in the delayed smile, the watchful eyes. She carries its weight quietly, a promise to herself. They will not catch me unprepared again. You wake to the crackle of torches in the fog. This time, it's Westminster Abbey. The air smells of wax, incense, and destiny. Elizabeth stands ahead in white satin, glowing like a candle in the gloom. The crown of England gleams on velvet. She's about to be queen, but already knows the throne is a trap. It's 1559. Mary is gone, England exhausted, and Elizabeth, against all odds, has survived to inherit the chaos. You'd expect cheers and trumpets, but this is Tudor England. Half the realm calls her illegitimate, half thinks she's too Protestant, and everyone wonders how to control her. The splendor rests on ashes. She walks the aisle to the altar. Courtiers kneel, whispering prayers or curses. Centuries of war and betrayal seem to press down. She closes her eyes as the anointing oil touches her skin, not for guidance, but for endurance. Historians still debate whether she believed herself chosen or merely obligated, but either way she plays the role flawlessly. The coronation isn't about faith, it's about others believing in her. Then comes the moment that defines her. As the ceremony ends and the crowd cheers, she lifts her face, meets the torchlight, and smiles, not gently, but like someone who knows the jokes on everyone else. She isn't just queen, she's becoming a myth. At her first council meeting, she declares, "I have already joined myself in marriage to a husband, the Kingdom of England." The room chills. Power gained. Solitude sealed. She knows what others don't, the throne is built on bones. So she turns monarchy into performance. Every gesture becomes strategy. The Virgin Queen begins, not as purity, but as brilliant politics. A husband would fracture England, she weds the realm itself. During the coronation banquet, the kitchen sets fire to the curtains. Elizabeth simply raises her goblet and jokes, the flame, like my people's hearts, burns too warmly. Laughter erupts. Disaster becomes destiny, months later, she reshapes her court, Cecil the mastermind, Dudley the friend and maybe more, a swirl of poets, spies, schemers. She plays them like instruments. Every flick of her fan, every sigh is calculated. Whether instinct or learned skill, she sees through flattery and fear with ease, but queenship is no fairy tale. It's lonely, bureaucratic, relentless. Petitions, crises, endless paperwork. She rises before dawn, reads reports in multiple languages, eats standing up. The court calls her tireless, servants call her sleepless. Still she smiles, even when Parliament begs her to marry or ambassadors praise her virtue. Modesty is her mask, control, her art, yet the ghosts stay. And Bullen whispers. The tower's shadow follows. Whitehall's galleries hold imagined blades. Her freedom is a cage lined with ritual. One night, alone after the festivities, she removes the crown and traces the red marks it left on her forehead. So this is what it costs, she murmurs. The mirror reflects only a regal, tired woman trapped in a role she can never shed, because beneath the crown, she's still that wary girl from Hatfield, older, lonelier, wearing better jewelry. As she lies down, the wind rattles the shutters. Her hand twitches, still signing invisible documents in her dreams. You wake to laughter echoing through long corridors lined with portraits, silent witnesses to the Queen's performance. Her mood seems good, but in Tudor politics, laughter is armor. You're in Whitehall Palace, a maze of perfumes, tapestries, and flirtation. Courtiers swirl like bright fish in candlelight. In the center sits Elizabeth, radiant and unreadable. Every man is half in love with her, every woman half afraid. That's exactly how she wants it. Her courtship games are legendary. Robert Dudley, sweet Robin, knows her best. When he enters, there's a spark, a tilt of her head, a flash in her eyes. But he's married, and when Amy Robsart is found dead, scandal erupts. Whispers burn through England. Did the Queen have her killed? Elizabeth responds with icy grace. The truth, like cream, will rise to the top, she says, and turns to foreign affairs, but beneath the composure, loneliness deepens. She writes Dudley letters. Part love, part command, you must think I trust you above all others. And she does. Perhaps that's the tragedy, foreign suitors flood in, Archduke Charles, the Duke of Anjou, even Philip II of Spain. One morning at council, Cecil urges marriage for stability. She arches a brow, for whose stability, Lord Treasurer? The silence could sink a fleet. She knows marriage would mean sharing power. So she turns refusal into performance, flirts, promises, retreats. Every man leaves thinking he still has a chance. None do. The jewels, the silks, the pearls, they're camouflage. The Virgin Queen isn't a saint, she's a strategy. By refusing to marry, she becomes untouchable, both bride and sovereign. But the balancing act wears her down. Every smile is calculated, every rumor weaponized. One night, as her maids dress her hair, she laughs at her reflection. They think I am made of marble. Let them think so. Marble does not bleed. The room freezes. It's half joke, half truth. In private, she sometimes lets the mask slip. Candlelight flickers over unfinished letters. One reads, I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but the heart and stomach of a king. The ink blot at the end looks like a pulse gone still. Her ladies mirror her myth, pearls, poise, restraint. Compliments must sound effortless, envy must vanish. A careless rumor could end a career. Her court is a stage, politics danced, not debated. Poets praise her as goddess, playwrights flatter her in their lines. She becomes both muse and monarch, but when the palace sleeps, fatigue seeps in. She touches the ring that binds her to England, the husband she cannot leave. She has everything, and nothing. If I were loved as a woman, I could not be feared as a queen, she whispers to the dark, the candle gutters low. Her shadow flickers on the wall, no longer monarch or myth, just Elizabeth, small and terribly alone, mourning again. Sunlight creeps through the mullioned windows like an uninvited auditor. Whitehall no longer feels like a palace, more like an office that never closes. Parchment rustles, courtiers shuffle, a clerk coughs. The Queen's desk vanishes under piles of petitions and reports. Being Elizabeth means never clocking out. It's hard to romanticize monarchy when you see the grind, dawn dressing rituals, ambassadors with veiled barbs, nobles begging favors, bishops testing her patience. She rules 45 years without break, no heirs, no rest, just endless paperwork and intrigue. Even her smiles and frowns ripple into gossip and crisis. Her counsel reflects the weight of it all, Cecil with careful loyalty, Walsingham sleepless, the rest speaking in riddles of allegiance and ambition. She listens, nods, commits only when sure. Historians still debate if it's genius or fear, perhaps it's both. Her letters reveal the same intensity, margins filled, every inch used. One sharp, one tender, all signed Elizabeth are, authority written in ink, and sleepless nights. At night she walks the gallery alone, the city sprawling below. Plague brews again, always something, taxes, rebellions, famine. My people love me, she murmurs, but they little know what it costs. The court never sleeps either. Poets flatter, painters idealize, no one paints the dark circles under her eyes. She dines standing, reading briefs over cold mutton. Every decision can topple kingdoms. Parliament waits months for her signature, ambassadors, years. Time brings counsel, she says. It also brings ulcers, even kindness is edged with weariness. When a maid drops a cup and cries, Elizabeth sighs, God's wounds, child, it's only silver. Then softly, I have lost greater things. Every sip of wine is tested. Every night sharpens her like a blade that's never set down. When accused of being too cautious, she replies, better to watch 10 years than regret 1 hour. As midnight falls, she's back at her desk. Candle low, ink smudged. A distant lute drifts through the courtyard, for a heartbeat she softens, almost human. Then the clock chimes, and she bends to her papers again. This is her kingdom, paper, firelight, exhaustion. No heirs. No husband. Just Elizabeth, too strong to rest, too tired to feel it. Outside, a bell tolls for the plague. God send us health, she whispers. Then, quieter, and sleep. But the Queen of England never really sleeps. You wake to rain tapping against the leaded glass, faint and steady, the kind of sound that might lull you to sleep if you weren't in a place where sleep equals vulnerability. In Elizabeth's England, knowledge is survival, and ignorance is a death sentence. You step into her world of whispers, where every candle hides a shadow and every servant might be a spy. Sir Francis Walsingham, her spymaster, moves through the corridors like a ghost in human form. You can almost hear the creak of his boots on the wooden floorboards as he passes. He's the architect of a web so vast that even Elizabeth doesn't always know how many strands connect back to her. Letters are steamed open, messengers intercepted. Cryptic codes broken by candlelight. It's England's nervous system, pulsing with fear and paranoia. You see one of Walsingham's secretaries at work, squinting through thick spectacles, deciphering a message written in lemon juice. The words appear like magic under heat, the Queen must die. Just another Tuesday in the 1580s, you sit in on Elizabeth's briefing. The reports are grim, plots from Spain, conspiracies from Rome, Catholic uprisings brewing in the north. Her enemies multiply faster than she can count them. And yet, she remains calm, fanning herself as though all this treachery were merely a dull afternoon's entertainment. That's her gift again, poise in the face of panic. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth truly trusted anyone, or whether her entire reign was one long performance of control. She smiles easily, yes, but her eyes are always scanning, measuring. Even laughter feels like strategy. At court, paranoia becomes etiquette. Courtiers watch one another's words with surgical precision. Say too much, and you're out. Say too little, and someone suspects you're hiding something. You can practically feel the tension in the air, as though the entire palace is holding its breath. You catch a strange detail: her favorite ladies-in-waiting are chosen not only for beauty but for silence. The fewer questions they ask, the longer they last. One fringe tidbit: Elizabeth's maids were forbidden from writing letters without permission. Every word leaving the palace was, quite literally, state property, and yet, she keeps her composure. You watch her reading another intercepted note, a confession from a man who plotted to poison her with a jewel-laced glove. Her expression doesn't change. She folds the paper neatly, places it on the table, and says softly, "Let him confess again tomorrow. After dinner." Sometimes, though, her calm cracks at the edges. You glimpse her pacing alone at night. Her fingers twitching against the folds of her gown. A candle sputters, and she freezes, staring at the shadows like they might move. Then she sighs and whispers, "They will not have me so easily." The loneliness in her voice lingers even after she's gone. Her bodyguard swears she's fearless. You know better. Fear, for Elizabeth, isn't absence, it's fuel. It keeps her sharp. Every threat she survives becomes another reason to hold the throne tighter. The network of spies grows until it's less a service than an organism, alive, whispering, feeding on secrets. You follow one messenger into the streets of London, where the taverns buzz with rumor. A drunk sailor mutters about Spanish ships gathering in the south. A woman hums a song praising Mary Stuart. Somewhere nearby, a priest hides a coded letter in a loaf of bread. By morning, Walsingham will know about all of it. Back at court, Elizabeth listens to reports as she's dressed for the day. The layers of her gown feel almost symbolic, each fabric another barrier between her and the danger outside. As the final ruff is fastened around her neck, she jokes lightly, "If I must die, at least I'll be well dressed." The ladies laugh, because what else can they do? It's not all foreign intrigue either. Some of the threats come from inside her own household. Servants bribed to eavesdrop. Messengers slipping extra parchment into their sleeves. Even her food taster once confessed to selling gossip about her moods. No wonder she eats in silence, her fork trembling slightly between bites. You wonder how anyone could live like this for 40 years, half monarch, half prisoner of her own mistrust. But then, you realize she's learned to enjoy it in a strange way. The control, the tension, it's her lifeblood now. Without it, she might collapse. One day, a new letter arrives, its wax seal marked with an unfamiliar crest. Inside, evidence of a Catholic plot to replace her with Mary, Queen of Scots. Elizabeth's hand hesitates on the parchment. The name Mary hangs in the air like a curse. For years, she's avoided confronting that particular shadow. But soon, she won't have a choice. For now, though, she does what she always does, compartmentalizes. Deal with it, she tells Walsingham, as if assassination plots were a mild scheduling inconvenience. Then she adjusts her jewels, lifts her chin, and heads to her council meeting. Her courtiers bow as she enters. None of them know that, just an hour ago, someone tried to smuggle poison into her wine. None of them will know, because that's how Elizabeth keeps power. Fear shared is fear multiplied, and she's never been one for division. You watch her take her seat at the head of the long table, her face smooth and unreadable. Her eyes meet yours for a moment, calm, steady, dangerous. Trust, she says quietly, is for children and fools. And for a heartbeat, you believe her. The air in the palace grows heavier, thicker with the scent of ink, beeswax, and dread. You feel it before you see it, the slow build of tension that always follows when someone mentions Mary, Queen of Scots, you first catch a glimpse of her as a painted miniature on Elizabeth's desk. Auburn hair, luminous skin, eyes that seem to smirk even through pigment. She's beautiful, clever, and, most dangerously, legitimate in the eyes of half of Catholic Europe. The perfect mirror to Elizabeth's carefully curated Virgin Queen myth. And mirrors, as you've learned by now, are her least favorite thing. You lean in as Elizabeth studies that portrait. She doesn't scowl or sigh, just stares, unmoving, as if trying to decide whether she's looking at a cousin or a curse. Mary Stuart's life has been chaos from birth, queen at 6 days old, widowed by 18, and back in Scotland leading rebellions by 25. She marries badly, chooses worse, and makes enemies faster than courtiers pour wine. When her second husband, Lord Darnley, turns up murdered under suspiciously convenient circumstances, Mary's reputation plummets faster than her prospects. Elizabeth, ever the cautious one, watches from afar like someone observing a house fire from the safety of another hill. Poor soul, she says, but you can tell she means, poor soul, and thank God it's not me. Still, when Mary flees across the border into England in 1568, begging Elizabeth for protection, it's like a fox asking a hawk for shelter. Elizabeth can't send her back, it would look cruel. She can't free her, that's national suicide. So she chooses the third option, keep her close, very close, under what's politely called house arrest. You walk with her guards as they escort Mary to various castles, Bolton, Tutbury, Sheffield. The rooms are comfortable, the meals generous, but freedom is an illusion. Even the tapestries feel like they're watching her. Elizabeth calls it custody for her own safety, but you can almost hear the irony grinding in her teeth. At first, Mary plays the guest. She writes to Elizabeth with flowery affection, "My dear sister in Christ," she begins, all honeyed diplomacy. Elizabeth replies in kind, each word a chess move, each compliment a blade. Historians still argue whether they ever truly hated each other, or if they simply became prisoners of circumstance. Two women, one crown, and a world that only allowed room for one of them to rule. The years roll on, and Mary's gilded prison turns to rust. She's accused of plotting again and again, whether she actually does or not. The truth is, the conspiracies often form around her, not necessarily by her. Ambitious Catholic nobles use her name like a flag. Spain whispers encouragement. France sends polite notes of sympathy. Every new rumor tightens Elizabeth's nerves another notch. You can feel it when the first major plot is uncovered, the Ridolfi plot, 1571. Letters, codes, papal blessings, the works. Walsingham pounces like a hawk. The conspirators are executed. Mary denies everything, of course. "My heart is pure," she writes. Elizabeth sighs. Yes, so was Darnley's, until it exploded. The two queens never meet in person, not once in 20 years. And yet, their lives are entangled like vines strangling each other in the dark. Mary becomes a symbol, of rebellion, of faith, of everything Elizabeth's enemies desire. She's the dangerous dream of another England. You watch Elizabeth wrestle with herself over it. There's genuine guilt there, you think. She knows Mary's imprisonment makes her both judge and jailer, and she hates being either. But every time she considers leniency, another assassination attempt rears its head. There's Throckmorton. There's Perry. Each time, the name Mary appears in the margin somewhere, faint but unmistakable. By the time the Babington plot surfaces in 1586, the patience of everyone, including the audience in your head, has snapped. Walsingham's agents intercept letters written to Mary in cipher, smuggled inside beer barrels. When decoded, they reveal her consent to a plan that would kill Elizabeth and place Mary on the throne. You see Elizabeth reading the evidence. She doesn't shout. She doesn't even blink. She has signed her own death warrant, she says quietly, and the room goes still. Then she hesitates, the hesitation of someone who's killed many metaphorically but never literally by decree. Her advisors press her to act. Parliament howls for blood. Even Cecil loses patience. Mercy is treason now, he warns. But Elizabeth can't quite bring herself to put pen to paper. She stalls for weeks, pacing, praying, arguing with herself. The act of killing another queen, especially one anointed and royal by birth, feels sacrilegious. She says, to strike the crown upon another's head is to curse your own. And yet, the warrant is signed. Maybe by her own hand. Maybe quietly delegated. Historians still debate how deliberate that signature was. A legal sleight of hand or an exhausted surrender. Either way, Mary is executed at Fotheringhay Castle on a grey February morning. You stand in the great hall as Mary steps up to the scaffold in crimson, the colour of martyrdom. She removes her black gown, smiles faintly, and says, "Into thy hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit." The axe falls, and the silence that follows is deafening. News reaches Elizabeth hours later. You can almost feel her go cold. "They have done what I forbade," she insists, her voice trembling. But no one quite believes her, not then, not now. She shuts herself in her chambers for days, refusing to eat. When she finally emerges, her first words are not queenly but heartbreakingly human: "The Queen of Scots is dead. Would that I were a milkmaid, and none of this were mine to bear." From that day on, you notice something shift in her. The laughter grows rarer. The eyes harder. The mask thicker. She's won, yes, but it's a victory that tastes like ashes. You sit in the candlelight of your private chamber, the wax dripping slowly down the sides, the air thick with the scent of burning tallow and anxiety. You're no longer the young, fiery queen who once danced in golden halls, mocking the notion of marriage as if it were a joke for lesser souls. Now you're in your 50s, still sharp, still fierce, but undeniably tired. The courtiers still flatter you, of course, they have to, but you can tell that when you walk past, they whisper about your thinning hair, your painted face, your refusal to age gracefully. It's not cruelty, exactly. It's curiosity, the same way people gawk at a relic that somehow still moves. You become a living monument. And monuments, you realize, are lonely things. You've built an empire that now stretches across oceans. The English flag waves in the New World. Spanish ships tremble before your navy. Sir Francis Drake returns with ships full of silver and spices, and everyone calls it glory. Yet at night, when the noise dies down, you can't help wondering if all that gold really makes up for the sound of children's laughter that never filled these chambers. You think of Robert Dudley. You still have his last letter, the one he sent before his sudden death in 1588, signed "Your ever loyal and affectionate servant." You keep it in a locked box, but you know every word by heart. Sometimes, you open it just to feel something again. Historians still argue whether you truly loved him or if he was simply a symbol of the affection you could never fully allow yourself to have. Some say you couldn't bear the idea of dependence, that the moment you loved someone too much, you'd lose the throne itself. Others say you were just human, scared to be hurt, yet too proud to show it. The truth? It's probably both. As you age, your image becomes a state project. Artists paint you as the Virgin Queen, surrounded by celestial symbols and divine light. The portraits get stranger, your face frozen in eternal youth, your body swathed in lace and jewels, every flaw erased by layers of paint and myth. The irony doesn't escape you. To stay in power, you've had to become a legend, but legends don't bleed, laugh, or grow old. You notice courtiers now treat you carefully, like someone fragile beneath the crown. They say your majesty in tones just a little too soft. When your temper flares, and it still does, they bow and murmur that it's only your royal spirit. You know they're humoring you. You can feel your control slipping, like sand through a closed fist. Your ladies-in-waiting whisper behind your back. You catch a reflection of one of them rolling her eyes as you adjust your wig. You try to laugh it off, even queens need their illusions, you say, but it stings. It always does. One night, as the court celebrates yet another victory, you retreat early. You pass through the silent corridors of Whitehall, where tapestries of your younger self hang on the walls. In each, your painted eyes stare out at you, serene, powerful, untouchable. But the woman standing there now knows better. The crown feels heavier than ever. You remember your cousin Mary's execution, the war with Spain, the endless parade of suitors you rejected, the councils you overruled, the letters you signed that sent men to their deaths. You remember the cheers of the crowd and the cold silence afterward. You've ruled for decades, yet there's not one person left who truly knows you. Even your closest advisors tread carefully. As if afraid to wake something sleeping under your calm facade, a servant interrupts your thoughts to remind you it's time for prayers. You nod, dismiss him, and sit alone. You whisper, "I am but mortal," into the empty room. The echo comes back, mortal. Mortal, and for a fleeting second, you almost wish you weren't queen at all. That you were just Elizabeth, not the ruler, not the symbol, but a woman allowed to love, to age, to be forgotten. But then you straighten your back, because even your private despair must be regal. You can't afford to let anyone see how much it sucks to be both worshipped and utterly alone. Some historians insist this solitude made you stronger, that it gave you an edge no man could match. Others believe it hollowed you out from the inside, that by the end, you were playing the role of Elizabeth the Great more than you were living it. Maybe they're both right. Outside, London hums through the night, the city that has grown under your reign, dirty and brilliant and alive. And you, sitting in your chamber, realize that your people have outgrown you. They will move forward. You will fade into memory. And somehow, that's both comforting and unbearable. You take a slow breath. The candle gutters. You close your eyes, and for once, you let yourself imagine, not a throne, not a victory, but a quiet garden, a man who loves you, and no one calling you majesty. But then the bell tolls. Duty calls again. It always does. Morning creeps through the drapes of Richmond Palace, pale and watery like the light of a world that's grown tired. You wake slowly, stiff in the joints, every movement reminding you that the body beneath the crown has grown old. You used to rise to fanfares, music, and gossip. Now the silence feels like the truest sound of your court. The courtiers are careful not to disturb you before they must. They've learned, an aging queen is unpredictable. Like a cat that once ruled the room and still pretends to, you pull the covers closer for a moment, pretending you might just stay in bed. But queens don't sleep in. They perform. Even in their final acts, you're 70 now, which, by 16th century standards, is practically a miracle. Maybe a curse. Your teeth ache, your hair, what's left of it, is hidden beneath towering wigs, and you need layers of powder to keep up the illusion of agelessness. The courtiers still praise your beauty, but it sounds like a habit rather than belief. Historians still argue whether you really believed your own myth or simply played along because the alternative, facing time itself, was too terrifying to contemplate. You shuffle to your mirror. It's cruelly honest in the daylight. You almost laugh, the Virgin Queen, now looking more like a ghost who hasn't yet realized she's dead. You whisper, "Vanity of vanities," and then, just as quietly, but still necessary. There's no council meeting today. No foreign ambassadors. No more grand intrigues. You've outlived nearly everyone who mattered. Cecil is gone. Walsingham too. The courtiers are now the sons of the men you once ruled over like chess pieces. They smile differently, with that mix of deference and impatience reserved for heirs waiting on an inheritance. The kingdom is changing faster than you can manage. The merchants are rising, the Puritans grumble about your rituals, and Parliament grows bolder each year. You feel it, power shifting beneath your feet like sand. And though you've spent a lifetime standing tall against tides, this one feels inevitable. One evening, when the court prepares for some dull entertainment you no longer enjoy, you dismiss everyone early. You walk the corridors alone, trailing your fingers along the walls. The tapestries show your triumphs, the defeat of the Armada, your radiant coronation, but they look faded, as though even the threads have grown weary of pretending. A servant meets you at the door to your chapel. Bowing deeply, you wave him away. Inside, the candles flicker against the cold stone. You kneel, though it takes effort. The silence presses against your ears. You think of your motto, Semper Idem, always the same. You'd meant it as strength, constancy. Now it feels like a cruel joke. You've been the same for too long. Sometimes, you still hear the cheers of your subjects echoing in memory, that day at Tilbury, when you stood before your troops and said you had the heart and stomach of a king. Historians love that line. They debate whether you actually said it or if it was polished later to fit the legend. But you remember the fear, the rush, the sense that, for once, you were truly alive. That speech wasn't about courage, it was about survival. You were bluffing your way through a moment that could have destroyed you. And it worked. Now, though, there's no one left to bluff. No war to rally. Just a slow decline, a quiet fading. You take to sitting by the fire, staring into the flames as if they might tell you what comes next. Courtiers whisper that you refuse to go to bed, that you stand for hours rather than sleep, afraid of what dreams might bring. They're right. When you do drift off, you see ghosts, your father's heavy shadow, your mother's pleading eyes, your cousin's head falling beneath the axe. You see the young Elizabeth, sharp-tongued and alive, looking at you with something like pity. You wonder what she would think of what you've become, a living relic propped up by ritual and rouge. You might tell her that ruling England wasn't worth it, but she wouldn't believe you. No one ever does. One night, when your ladies try to coax you into bed, you refuse again. You whisper, "Must" is a word not to be used to princes, and they freeze. The line makes you smile. Even now, you can't resist a bit of drama. You know the end is close. The aches are worse, the breath shorter. Your words slip sometimes, as if your mind is already halfway somewhere else. Still, you cling to the throne, even as you no longer sit upon it. You have no heir, no child to carry your face into the future. Only a legacy built on decisions that once felt impossible. You remember them all, the executions, the betrayals, the calculated coldness that kept you alive. You want to believe it was worth it. That the loneliness bought something lasting. Historians still argue whether your final years were tragic or triumphant. Some say you went out in full command, undefeated. Others say you dwindled into melancholy, mumbling to shadows and mourning what could never be. Maybe they're both right again. Maybe power always ends that way, in confusion, in contradiction, in the echo of your own name fading down a long corridor. The fire burns low. You think you see a shape in the glow, a familiar silhouette, maybe Dudley's, maybe your mother's. You reach out your hand. The warmth stings your palm. For a moment, it feels like someone's touching you back, and then it's gone. Just light. Just heat. You sink into your chair. The room hums faintly. The distant pulse of a world that's already preparing for life without you. You take one slow, shuddering breath and close your eyes. Not to sleep yet. Just to rest. Queens never sleep easily. The room is quiet now, save for the soft creak of old wood and the uneven rhythm of your breathing. It's late February, 1603. Outside, the Thames groans beneath sheets of ice, and even the courtiers whisper as if the air itself might shatter from the chill. You've taken to sitting on cushions instead of lying in bed. You say it helps you breathe, but everyone knows it's because you don't want to close your eyes. Not yet. Not when there's still one more dawn to witness. Your ladies hover at a distance, pretending to sew, but their eyes never leave you. They've all grown up under your reign. To them, you've always been there, the sun that refused to set. They can't imagine England without you. You can't, either, you murmur something to yourself, tracing invisible shapes on your sleeve. The words don't quite make sense anymore. Some of them are prayers, others are just fragments of memories you can't shake. Dudley, you whisper once, and one of your ladies pretends not to hear. Historians still argue whether you went quietly mad in these final weeks or simply drifted into a kind of trance, half in this world, half already gone. Either way, your mind seems to wander through time like a ghost, revisiting every room it's ever ruled. You remember being 17 again, locked in the tower, unsure if you'd live to see another sunrise. You remember the thrill of being crowned, the burn of the gold on your head, the smell of incense and fear. You remember your first parliament, your first rebellion, your first heartbreak. They all blur together now, like candle flames seen through tears. Someone brings food, broth, soft bread, but you wave it away. You haven't eaten properly in days. It's not stubbornness anymore. It's simply that your body doesn't care. It's done pretending to be royal. It just wants to stop. You ask for a mirror again. They hesitate, but they bring it. You stare into it for a long time, and for once, you don't flinch. The face looking back is more skull than queen, the rouge can't hide the hollows, the powder only makes the eyes look deeper. You nod, as if accepting a verdict you've known all along. I am tired, you whisper, so tired of being myself. The courtiers outside argue quietly about the succession. They think you can't hear, but you always could. They talk of James of Scotland, your cousin's son, Mary's son, the same Mary whose execution warrant you signed with trembling hands. You think of the irony and almost smile. He'll inherit the throne you bled to protect, and he'll undo your careful balance between extremes in a matter of years. But that's not your problem anymore. You've done what you could. They ask if you'll name him, to make it official. You don't answer for a long time. Then you whisper, I suppose so. That's all they'll get from you. The Virgin Queen will leave England not with a proclamation but a sigh. As the evening deepens, you motion for the candles to be snuffed, all but one. Shadows crawl up the walls, twisting around the portraits that once flattered you. The silence feels thick enough to drown in. Somewhere far off, the bells of London toll for vespers. You think about the people outside these palace walls, the ones who never saw your face but still called you Gloriana. They'll mourn you, you suppose, but only for a moment. Then they'll go on, just as they always have. The baker will still bake, the children will still play, and the Thames will keep rolling toward the sea. The world has a way of carrying on without its rulers. That's the final truth no monarch wants to face. Your hand trembles as you reach for the small cross beside your chair. It feels heavy, like stone. You trace its edge and think of your mother, and Bullen, who must have felt the same cold metal before her own ending. You've spent your life trying not to be her, and now, in the quiet of your last night, you wonder if she'd be proud of you or just pity you. Your chaplain enters softly. He begins to pray, his voice a low drone like distant bees. You try to follow, but the words dissolve. The fire flickers, and suddenly you're not in Richmond anymore, you're on the river again, the same river you crossed on your coronation day, sunlight flashing off the water, crowds shouting your name. For a brief moment, you feel that warmth again, then it fades. The cheers become wind, the gold becomes dust. You whisper something no one quite catches, maybe a name, maybe just a breath. One of your ladies leans close, holding your hand. She says softly, "Rest easy, Majesty." You want to tell her that's the one thing you never learned how to do. The last candle trembles. Your eyes flutter once, twice. Then they stay closed. It's the end of March, 1603. England will wake to find itself motherless. The reign of Elizabeth is over. Historians still debate your last words. Some claim you said nothing at all. Others insist you murmured, "All my possessions for a moment of time." Whatever it was, it feels fitting, a queen to the last breath, still bargaining with the inevitable. The silence that follows is immense. Then, somewhere outside, a bird begins to sing. Dawn is coming, you wake, not to life, but to memory. The palace is silent, yet full of echoes, laughter of courtiers long dead, whispers of advisers, the soft footfalls of a young Elizabeth pacing through corridors. You float among them, a spectator to the life you once wore like armor. Each corridor feels impossibly long, stretching into infinity, and yet it's all familiar. Every roof, every candle stub, every polished floorboard carries a fragment of your reign. You remember the Armada. That brilliant, terrifying summer when Spain sent its massive fleet against England. You stand on the cliffs of Tilbury in your mind's eye, your crimson gown rippling in a wind that smells of salt and gunpowder. You hear the cheers of soldiers calling you queen, their voices strong, eager, fearful. They didn't yet know how fragile their victory would feel when the next crisis arrived. It was glory, yes, but also exhaustion. You recall gripping the fabric of your sleeve as if it could hold the weight of the entire kingdom. You spoke of courage, yet every word was a negotiation with fear. Historians still argue whether it was bravery or sheer willpower that saved England. Maybe it was both. You wander into a private study, papers scattered like autumn leaves. Letters from ambassadors, petitions from subjects, reports of conspiracies long dissolved. You notice the folds in your hands, the way the ink stains never quite fade from memory. In some of those letters, you see yourself, vibrant, cunning, relentless. In others, you see the ghost of a girl who wanted to love without consequences, who wanted a life untouched by crowns and intrigues. Your gaze drifts to the portrait of Dudley again. You trace the outline of his face in your mind, remembering laughter, whispered confidences, unspoken longings. It was a love that could never fully bloom, restrained by duty, fear, and circumstance. Historians still debate whether it was affection or political theater that bound you together. You remember both truths, the thrill of proximity and the terror of loss. You walk through rooms that no longer exist as they once did, corridors that bend time and memory. The smells of wax, perfume, and roasted meats linger faintly, like shadows of experience. You recall late nights pacing alone, replaying plots, murders, betrayals. You remember the faces of those executed. Some guilty, some innocent, all part of the machinery you commanded. The moral weight presses down in the memory, a gravity you could never escape. The court surrounds you, spectral and silent. Courtiers who lived and died under your rule form a moving tapestry of service, ambition, envy, and loyalty. You see Mary Stuart again, her head bowed in prayer on that scaffold, crimson robes swaying like a pendulum marking time. You feel the simultaneous weight of victory and remorse. The decisions that once felt necessary now seem almost cruel. In this half-dream, you witness your own legacy forming, ships sailing to the new world, art commissioned, laws decreed, a nation transformed by your touch. And yet, all of it is shadowed by isolation. You are everywhere and nowhere. The crown, the power, the myth, they were both your salvation and your cage. You pause by a window overlooking a sunlit river. The reflection in the glass is not just yours, but of all who served, who plotted, who loved and feared you. The truth of your life settles softly in your mind. To be Elizabeth is to have everything and nothing at once. Power, glory, history, but the quiet, unobserved moments, those were always out of reach, and yet, somehow, it was worth it. You take one last step through memory, feeling the cool stone underfoot, the faint rustle of silk, the ghost of a smile that once charmed an empire. You realize the throne is not just a place but a weight carried in moments like this, stretching across time. The echoes begin to fade, and the world feels still, waiting, but not quite silent. You drift through the final hours, feeling the pulse of England beneath your fingertips. The air carries distant sounds, church bells ringing across the city, the faint slap of oars on the Thames, the murmur of a world oblivious to the queen who has shaped it. In these quiet moments, all the grandiosity falls away. You are just Elizabeth, the woman behind the crown. The ruler who laughed, feared, loved, and endured beyond measure. You think back on the countless councils, the endless petitions, the whispered betrayals. Courtiers who tried to sway you, advisors who bent every argument to their will, rivals who plotted your downfall, all are now part of the tapestry that surrounds you. Each thread is a story, a lesson, a memory that weighs as heavily as the crown itself. You remember the meticulous care you took with your image, your speeches, your portraits. The public always saw perfection, but the private cost was enormous. Sleep, comfort, companionship, all sacrificed at the altar of duty. You remember Mary Stuart one final time. The tension, the execution, the moral weight, it never truly left you. And yet, through it all, you maintained your composure, your brilliance, your reign. Your advisors debate whether mercy or fear guided your decisions, whether prudence or instinct kept you alive. You know the truth, it was all of it and none of it. Survival demanded everything, even when your heart ached for what could never be. Outside, London hums with life. The market cries of bakers, the chatter of children, the distant clatter of horse hooves, the city continues, indifferent to crowns and deaths. You feel the paradox of legacy, your life has reshaped a nation, yet the world moves on, unbowed, unbroken. Historians will study you for centuries, yet they will never grasp the texture of your exhaustion, the weight of loneliness, or the quiet terror of holding power alone. You think of your own mortality, the way the years etched lines, the way sleep became a negotiation, the way silence sometimes threatened to overwhelm you. And still, you feel a peculiar satisfaction. You did it. You outlived threats, plots, war, betrayal, and the relentless pressure of expectation. You stood alone and held the crown with courage few can imagine. A soft candle flickers in your chamber, and you imagine it illuminating your reign, victories, losses, loves, fears, and the ceaseless balancing act of a life under the gaze of history. The walls echo with your laughter, your whispers, your sighs. Time slows. You allow yourself one final, profound exhale. You are Elizabeth, and for 45 years, you carried the impossible. You shaped an empire, outwitted enemies, inspired a nation, and left a legacy that will endure long after the last candle flickers out. The weight of the crown lifts, finally, as your story blends into memory, into legend, into history. The world is still. You can rest now, the pace slows. The world softens around you, like light filtering through sheer curtains on a quiet morning. You no longer feel the urgency of councils, the tension of plots, or the weight of 1,000 eyes upon your face. The corridors of Whitehall stretch infinitely, silent but comforting, each step echoing like a heartbeat in a space that now belongs to memory rather than duty. You picture Elizabeth, finally at peace, sitting by a low-burning fire, the warmth creeping into her bones. The tapestries that once celebrated triumph now seem to cradle her, softening the sharp edges of her past. You imagine her inhaling slowly, deliberately, the scent of wax, paper, and faint perfume blending into a calm she rarely allowed herself. The world is outside, alive and bustling, yet here in this quiet, she is untouchable. Her reign stretches out in your mind like a map, every conquest, every alliance, every act of courage and restraint traced in soft, almost imperceptible lines. You feel the pulse of history itself, not as a series of events to memorize, but as a living, breathing testament to endurance. The laughter, the fear, the heartbreak, the victories, all mingle in a gentle hum that seems to settle over the palace like a protective blanket. Even the ghosts of those she loved and lost seem to lean in, offering silent companionship. Dudley's smile, Mary Stuart's tragic poise, her parents' faces, all linger without judgment. And through it all, there is a calm certainty. She did what she could, she stood when others would have fallen, and she left a world that would never forget her. as the candlelight fades, the echoes of her voice soften to a murmur. You sense the room breathing with her one last time, each inhalation and exhalation a gentle punctuation in the story of a life lived under immense pressure, brilliance, and solitude. The edges of time blur, and her story folds into memory, into legend, into the quiet rhythm of history itself. You take a deep breath and feel the weight of the crown lift, finally. Elizabeth's journey, filled with endurance, genius, and the relentless ache of human experience, concludes not with spectacle, but with serenity. The fire dies down, the palace rests, and the legacy of England's most iconic queen settles softly into the pages of time, and now, in this gentle stillness, you can drift with her, letting the echoes fade into a calm, endless night.